Yeah, it was over the weekend. It was really good to be able to join Christians from all over the state to kind of gather together, and good to have Harry and John and Rob come down on Friday, and they got to hear some of it as well. The highlight for me was I got to hear my home preacher. When I grew up, I got to hear him preach on Thursday night, and his son, who is 2 years younger than me, preached also. And so it was fun to get to see them and get to hear them preach, and it was a good time. So I also got to hear Jim Book preach the last sermon. It was high powered. He was like, woo, but you wanted to go out and do something. It was exciting. So it was good to hear him as well. We have been going through a series called When God Builds a Church. And we're going to look at the principles of harmony and fellowship today. So there was a large church that was a downtown in a large city. They had a beautiful structure. It had 4 stories. It was very dignified. The preacher they had was educated. They had a wonderful choir. It was like a professional quality choir. And the church practiced what one preacher described as a sort of osmosis evangelism. You know what osmosis is? You didn't know you were going to get a science lesson today, right? Well, osmosis is where things start to equal out, but they just kind of do it on their own. It's like what kids do when they're in school and they want to learn the information they need for the test the next day, and they put the textbook under their pillow and hope that all the information just kind of oozes into their brain. So they practiced osmosis evangelism. They expected Jesus Christ to just sort of ooze out of their fellowship into the world outside. Consequently, they were not seen by folks in the community as being a very active church, nor were they a growing church. Well, in the foyer, they had a beautiful 10-foot marble statue of Jesus Christ with his arms outstretched. One night, a fire broke out because of faulty wiring, and the whole church went up in flames. Oak walls in the sanctuary, walnut banisters, all of it was destroyed. The floor in the foyer around the statue of Christ gave way, and the statue went crashing to the floor of the basement. The next afternoon, after the fire department had doused the flames, workmen started to clean up and remove any of the surviving valuables. Then they were going to wreck what was left of the building for safety's sake. One of the workmen in the basement found the statue of Christ with hardly a mark on it. Hardly a chip was broken off. Gently, they got a cable around it. They lifted it out with a crane and set it on the sidewalk. 2 businessmen were passing by, and they looked at the ruins of the church and at the statue of Christ, and one of them sarcastically said, well, looks like Jesus is all they got left. And the other looked at the site and said, at least they got him out on the sidewalk where the people are. We need to be out amongst people, right? If we hide in here, are we going to get anything accomplished? No, we're not. And part of what the people see in a church, a lot of it has to do with what the harmony and the fellowship of the people in the church, how they are relating to each other. In John chapter 17, Jesus gives his final prayer, and he prays for his disciples. He prays for the people that are going to hear, and he prays even for us as the people that are going to come later. But in John chapter 17, verses 20 and 21, it says, my prayer is not for them alone, meaning his disciples. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. May they believe in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. He prayed for us so that we would be one together, living in harmony and showing the world what it means to be a Christian. So harmony is kind of a delicate thing, isn't it? You know, it can fall apart very quickly. There are some hindrances to harmony, I think. And Bob Russell, he presents 4 of them, and we'll talk about them. It's like, so the top 4 answers for hindrances of harmony are on the board. All right? So number 4 is false teaching. Now, that's something that the church had to deal with from the very beginning almost. It was very quickly people, they either misunderstood or they misheard perhaps, but false teaching began to come up very quickly. And that's something that we still have to deal with today. There are things that people teach that are just wrong. And we need to be alert for that. Number 3 is a legalistic spirit. So a legalistic spirit is, those are the people that they look and maybe they don't want to see change too much, but they just can't let go of certain things. We had a church, the church I was at in Indiana, it had been around since like the 1840s. And we celebrated like the 175th anniversary of the church while I was there. It was old. But we were going through like, they had so many nooks and crannies that stuff was stuck in. We found Sunday school material from like the 60s that was still stored back in somewhere. Actually, it was stored back in like one of the walls of the basement that they had put in there in the 70s. They had dug it out from underneath because they didn't have a basement, so they dug it out, put walls in, and then they put some storage space behind it where they dug out some extra dirt. And it all got stuffed into there. And we found it was like, why is this here? I mean, it wasn't like we were going to use it again. It was from the 60s. My mom started complaining in the 80s because she was looking at some of the Sunday school material that they were using then for the kids. And she said, I wrote this stuff in the 60s. And they hadn't changed it. They just kept reprinting it. So she was like, they need to change this because this is old and dated. And I didn't write it very well back then. She's learned more since then, But we have this, we have these sacred cows, don't we? That we just can't let go of. It's like, how many starving people are there in India? And you got hamburgers walking all over the roads, right? But they're not going to touch them because they're sacred. And we have those types of things, don't we? We struggle with those things. We struggle with a legalistic spirit. Sometimes we want to hold people to rules rather than trying to help them build a relationship with Jesus. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a place for some rules, but when the rule overshadows people, it can sometimes become a problem. So criticism is number 2. Criticism. Everybody likes to be criticized, right? No? It's not fun, is it? Now, if it's constructive criticism, we might be okay with it. And if it's done in a nice way, but this is maybe more like the criticism that's just somebody, it's like, that's all you ever hear coming out of their mouth, right? They can find the black lining in a silver cloud, right? But when we hear enough criticism, it begins to wear at the harmony of a church. And sometimes it's just an uncontrolled ego. That's the number 1 answer. Uncontrolled egos. We like to be able to do things. We like to be important, don't we? We like to feel important. But sometimes, things have to change ultimately. We can't continue to do things the same way over and over again, especially if it's not working. But sometimes that's their where they fit in. That's their cubbyhole that they fit into. And their ego is going to be hurt. Well, that's what I do. And if you're going to take that away, then what am I supposed to do? Find something else? But it's hard. Before Sunday school, some were talking about going to a church and being told they couldn't sit there because that was somebody's spot that they sit in. You don't know anything about that, do you? Yeah. I went. Jill, and Austin, and Brooklyn, and I were going back to Louisville from vacation. We spent vacation in Pensacola with my brother and sister-in-law, and we were heading back. We were supposed to get all the way to Louisville and go to church with my parents the next day. When we left, Jill was sicker than a dog. It took us 2 hours to get out of Pensacola because I had to stop every 2 or 3 blocks to let her throw up. And then she finally went to sleep, and I was like, yes, I can drive. And then Brooklyn and Austin go, we're hungry. Give me an hour. Just give me 1 hour. So they said, okay. So they said they could wait an hour. So 3 hours later, they finally woke up because they went to sleep, and I'm like, I am not stopping. So I found a place that it was kind of a place where they had 2 or 3 restaurants around that shared a parking lot. So I had to figure out which one was the least smelly and everything else was downwind, and park it there so Jill didn't get sick smelling all the things from the restaurants while I took the kids in to eat. Fortunately, there was a Frisch's. They had their breakfast brunch, Saturday brunch thing going. So everybody got taken care of. We were good. We got back on the road, but I was like, we are not making it to Louisville. So we stopped. I figured out a place we could stay in North Alabama. And we stopped. I got a hotel. Now, again, Jill is sick. I didn't want the kids to get sick, so I put them in a room of their own. That was probably dumb. But I didn't want them to get sick. That was the last thing I needed was 3 sick people in the car. And then Jill and I had a room. So while we were there, I started looking in the phone book going, I know, that's old school, right? But they had a phone book. That was the only way I knew to do it. So I looked up the churches. I found a Christian church. So we were going there. The biggest struggle I had that night was getting Brooklyn to realize you can wear shorts and sandals. It's okay. Because she at that point was wearing nothing but dresses to church. It'll be okay. God's not going to throw you out. You're fine. So we went to church the next day, and we walked in. We found a seat. We sat. But then we noticed there was people staring at us. It was like, oh, we must be in somebody's seat. So we moved. We moved to a second spot, and we were getting stared at. Well, again, we were in somebody else's seat. So about the 3rd time that happened, we just stood in the back until everybody came in, and they was like, oh, look, there's some chairs. We'll go get those. And then we were okay, I think. At least nobody came up and said anything to us, but, But, it made it hard it was weird trying to worship that day, Like, well, are we in somebody's spot? I think the funniest thing I ever did, when I was the preacher in Indiana, we had the piano, and when I got there, it was on the right side of the stage, down on the floor. Well, I noticed why, I don't know, but I noticed that the stage it went this way, and then on that side, which is where the baptistry was, it cut in and down. So there was actually more room there. And the people over here they were squeezing through, trying to get past the piano to do communion and pass communion out. I was like, what would happen if we moved it over here? Wouldn't that give us more room? And they were like, yeah, it would. But here's the funny thing. You know how you remember Shonda Pierce, the comedian? You know, she had a routine called second row piano side. That was where they always sat. Second row, piano side. There we were. So I moved the piano from that side to this side. The people in the front rows switched places. It was the weirdest thing, but it was funny. It's funny how we get into patterns, isn't it? Yeah. I went to the Indiana statewide ministers meeting where it was preachers from all denominations that came. We got to hear the governor speak and things like that. And they had the governor's preacher get up and introduce him. And this is the way he introduced him. He says, I've only been there like 6 months. And he goes, I haven't really gotten to know him that well, but I'll introduce you the way I know him best. He sits about right here. You know, I bet Lorraine takes attendance by where she sees spots filled. Don't you? Yeah, I kind of do it too, I have to admit. Because it's like, I expect these people to be in these spots. That spot was empty. Were they there? You know, but we've got to build harmony. One of the ways we build harmony is, number one, we got to be humble. We have to be humble when it comes to being, having a harmony within the church. There was Leonard Bernstein was a famous orchestra conductor, and he was performing one evening on television. And during an informal time, during the discussion on the program, one of his admirers said, Mr. Bernstein, what is the most difficult instrument to play? And he responded with a quick wit. He said, second fiddle. He said, I can get plenty of first violinists, but to find one who will play second violin with as much enthusiasm, or second French horn, or second flute, now that's the problem. He said, and yet if no one plays second, we have no harmony. It's the same thing in the church, isn't it? We have to be humble. Not everybody's going to be up on the stage. Not everybody's going to have a big job. But we all have jobs. Some of them are smaller, but that's okay. But the key is, are we going to be humble enough to do what we're called to do by God, no matter what how flamboyant maybe it is? Are we willing to maybe just let somebody else take the attention? Are we willing to let them be up front? Yeah, it's not always easy, but how do we do that? Another thing we need to do is we need to be flexible. I learned this very quickly in youth ministry. I can plan something out to the finest detail, and the minute those kids show up, it explodes and just blows up. So, the voice of experience over here. I mean, it was, I called youth ministry, it was like, it's basically fly by the seat of your pants. I don't care how much you do, how much you plan. It ends up flying by the seat of your pants, thinking, how am I going to make this work? I had a girl in my youth group in Louisville one time. She said, what if we only have like 2 or 3 kids? I said, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do it. And she was like, really? She's like, the youth minister we had before, if we only had a couple of kids, he would just cancel it. I said, if we got 2 or 3, that's fine. We'll do it. It's going to look a lot different than what I had planned, but we're still going to do it. And see, that's the thing. We need to be flexible. If somebody sits in your pew, be flexible. Move somewhere else. Displace somebody else and see how many we can make people move. Make it a game. I mean, seriously, that'd be fun, right? Can you imagine, Lorraine trying to take attendance? It's like, she's going to have to come up here and do it. It's like, okay, so I can see their faces, right? But be flexible. We don't always get things our way. I know that's a shock to most of us, right? We don't get things our way all the time. There was a German philosopher named Schopenhauer who compared the human race to a bunch of porcupines huddling together on a cold winter's night. He said, the colder it gets outside, the more we huddle together for warmth. But the closer we get to one another, the more we hurt one another with our sharp quills. And in the lonely night of Earth's winter, eventually we begin to drift apart and wander out on our own and freeze to death in our loneliness. He's not too far off, is he? Especially when it comes to the world. The sad thing is, so much of the world, we see it here in the church very often. But we need to be flexible. And we need to have some humor about things, right? Sometimes we just need to laugh things off. Rusty and I there was a youth thing. And I was in college by then. He was, I think, a junior or senior in high school. But we had the college-age kids playing the high school kids in football. I mean, of course, no pads. And of course, we were stupid and played tackle. But we were playing down at the new property that the church was getting ready to build on because it was a huge open field and it had been raining, so it was somewhat muddy, which made it a little bit more fun. But Rusty, I don't know, he came down and threw the line. Why I was playing defensive line, I really don't know, because I wasn't that big, but neither was he. But he came in, and I knew where I was standing. I was standing in a big old bunch of mud, and if I tried to plant my foot and get him, I was going to slide and fall and just totally miss. So all I did was I jumped. And I hit him, knocked him down, and then I landed right on top of him. I buried the preacher's kid. It was fun. All he could do was, he was just laying there, and all he could do was go, you had to tackle me in the one spot that was dry in this entire field. It was the hardest packed dirt that was left. And we landed in that right spot, and I was right, I didn't feel it, but I mean, all we could do was laugh. And, but sometimes that's what we've got to do. We just got to let it go and laugh. Be flexible, laugh it off. Because God has called us to be one. He wants us to be one. Another thing we need to do to stand up for harmony is we need to stand united in the truth. And that may be one of the hardest things to do, because does everybody here have their own opinions? Yeah, we do, don't we? And all our time, our opinions agree with each other, right? In a perfect world. Well, we're not there yet. Yeah, we got to stand united in the truth, though. We may have some differences in how we interpret things a little bit, but ultimately we got to stand for what is true. And in our world, the world is searching for truth. But it's not easy to find. Sometimes it's just hard to find. I mean, pick up a newspaper or listen to the news on TV. What's truth? You listen to 6 different TV stations, you're going to get 6 different stories. Which one's right? What is truth? I mean, we have a truth in front of us, the Bible. If we can stand on the Bible and say, look, this is what truth is, then we should be able to stand up in harmony and defend that and stand up for it. But very often it doesn't happen that way, and there are a lot of churches that fall apart. Several years ago in Del Mar, California, there was a man. He took a glass beaker, which had a small neck and was enlarged to about 7 inches of diameter down at the bottom. You guys have seen those in science class, right? And he took that. He took that the beaker, and it would hold about a quart. And the demonstrator, he used that glass beaker as a hammer to drive a nail into a piece of wood. And the beaker didn't break. The glass had been tempered so well that it did not break when he drove a nail into wood. But then the man took a small steel marble, maybe something the size of a pea, and put it at the top, the lip of the beaker, and dropped it. And as soon as it hit the bottom, it shattered the beaker. He hammered a nail with this thing, and he drops a little pea-sized piece of metal, a metal ball in there, and it totally shatters this beaker. It was because it had been tempered on that outside, but the inside was not the same tempering. And it totally destroyed it. You know, when we as the church, it happens the same way sometimes. As the church, we may be strong on the outside, but man, sometimes there are things that come into the middle. When disharmony begins to show up in a church, it can destroy it from the inside. And it's sad when that happens. Theodore Steinway, and Galatians 5:15, that's what this is telling us here. If you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out or you're going to be destroyed by each other. If we sit and argue amongst ourselves, what does that show the world? It shows us we're really no different than them. And we're not working to change to be any different from them. As the church, we're called to be different and called to do things differently. But if we start nitpicking at each other, we start to destroy ourselves from the inside out. Steinway, Theodore E. Steinway was the president of Steinway and Sons. They made pianos, right? And he said this. He said, in one of our concert grand pianos, there are 243 taut strings exert a pull of 40,000 pounds on an iron frame. It is proof that out of great tension may come great harmony. We can still disagree with each other, and we can still have issues with each other. But if we will be humble and be flexible, be humorous, and we stand for what is true, then we can be strong despite of that. And there's a harmony that comes with that. Romans chapter 12, verses 14 through 18, it says, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Live in harmony with one another. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. We're called to be together and be this harmonious place that sets an example for how people should get along. We hold each other up. Well, and that leads us into another section of this where it's about it's all about fellowship. Harmony and fellowship kind of go together. Fellowship is a common commitment. We have a commitment together. We have fellowship with each other because we have a like faith. We have fellowship with each other because we believe the same things. And we want the same goals because we want the goals of Jesus. We want to do what He has called us to be. In Acts 2:42, it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And then skipping down to verse 46, it says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This fellowship they had, it's living together, doing life together. They didn't just, they met together for a meal because what better way to do life together? What do we talk about when we're around a table having a meal together? We talk about our day. We talk about the things going on in our lives. We share things. And when we share things with fellow Christians, then we begin to do life together. The early Christians, it says, were devoted to fellowship. So it said they met together. They met in public worship to praise God. So they continued to meet together in the temple courts, right? But they also met in each other's homes and shared a meal together. They met their physical needs. It said later on in Acts 6, it talks about they had all things in common. They were sharing things. They were taking care of each other. And they cared for each other in sicknesses. In Acts chapter 9, it talks about, they cared for people because they were sick. And it talks about Tabitha, who was a woman who was very into making sure people were being taken care of. She would help them get over their sicknesses. That's a lot. There's a lot of things that can go on. There are some things that fellowship can do for us. See, true fellowship, if we are truly doing life together, true fellowship kind of breeds harmony. If we're doing things together and we're constantly together with each other, yeah, we might get on each other's nerves, but ultimately we know what's going on, right? We know what's going on in their lives. So, hey, if they're being a little grouchy with me, maybe it's because of this going on. We know those things because we care about them and we want to be a part of their lives. Ann Ortland tells a story. She says, Christians can be grouped into two categories, marbles and grapes. It's interesting, right? Marbles are single units that don't affect each other except in collision. All right? Grapes, on the other hand, mingle their juices. Each one is a part of the fragrance of the church body. The early Christians didn't bounce around like loose marbles, ricocheting in all directions. Picture them as a cluster of ripe grapes squeezed together by persecution, bleeding and mingling into one another. Fellowship and worship, then, is a genuine Christianity freely shared among God's family members. It's sad to think how many Christians today, especially, are missing that kind of closeness. How many people do we know, they come to church, but then they never really interact with anybody else during the week? Now some people, they just want to be alone. I think it's hard. 10th Avenue North wrote a song called No Man is an Island. Okay? We can't do this alone. We need each other in Christianity. We need the strength. We need the faith. We need the support and encouragement that comes from being around people that believe the same thing we do. So true fellowship breeds harmony. But true fellowship can also create strength. The redwoods in California, those huge redwood trees, they're amazing to look at, right? They're huge. They're some of the largest living things on earth and the tallest trees in the world. Some of those trees are 300 feet high and over 2,500 years old. Now, one would think for a tree to get that big, it has to have a tremendous root system, right? It must go deep into the ground to keep those trees up straight. But the ironic thing is they actually have very shallow root systems. But the roots spread out and they become intertwined with the trees around them. And it's like one massive root system amongst a whole bunch of trees. And because of that, they're able to stand the storms. They can stand up to the storms. When the winds blows, the lightnings flash, the redwoods are still standing because they're not on their own for support. They have everybody, they have all the other trees around them that are there supporting them as well. That's what the church is supposed to be. We are supposed to have a fellowship that creates that kind of strength in our lives. When you may be going something, that's bad in your life, you're there and you're able to get through it because people in the church come and support you and lend their strength so you can get through those things. And really, true fellowship is also, it boils down to, it's worship. True fellowship is worship. Again, we're doing life together. We're living our lives and trying to help each other to grow, to become better Christians. Fred Craddock tells of a time that he was asked to go speak in Winnipeg, Canada. And when he awoke on Sunday morning, there was a couple feet of snow, and his host called him at the hotel and said, "Fred, this is a surprise to us, but there's so much snow, we can't get to the hotel to pick you up. And we're going to cancel the lecture series." So Fred said, what am I supposed to do then? Well, his host said, "Well, a block and a half on the right of the entrance of the hotel, there's a bus depot. And I know there's a deli in there, and you can at least get something to eat there." Well, Craddock said the place was packed, but when he went in, some of the people moved over, made room for him. And many of the people were in there just to get out of the cold. He said, "I ordered a bowl of soup, and a few minutes later, someone opened the door, and a shout came from inside the deli that said, 'Hey, shut that door, you're letting all the warm air out.' In came a rather unkempt woman. A couple of people made some room for her, and she sat down. Then a large man with a greasy apron came over and asked in a loud voice, 'What do you want?' She said, I'll take a glass of water." He said, he sat in front of her, or he sat the water in front of her, and he said, "Now what do you want?" And she said, "The water's fine." He said, "Lady, what do you want?" "Water's fine." "Look, lady, there are paying customers here, and either you're going to have to order something else or get out." She said, "Well, can I just stay in out of the cold?" He said, "No, you have to order something or leave." Slowly she scooted out of her seat, started to leave. But as she did, the person on her right and the person on her left got up to leave. Then the persons on either side of them got up to leave. And pretty soon, everyone started to leave. And the man in the greasy apron said, all right, come back, you can stay." She sat down, and he even gave her a bowl of soup. And Fred Craddock, he was starting to eat his soup, but he looked at a man next to him. He said, "Who is that lady?" The man said, "I don't know, but if she's not welcome here, I'm not welcome." He said, as he began to eat his soup, he said, it reminded him of something. He said it reminded him of something he had eaten before, but he couldn't figure out why it tasted so familiar. And as he ate the bowl of soup, he said, as he left the little deli, he looked back at the woman sitting there in that atmosphere, and he remembered what the soup tasted like. He said it tasted like the bread and wine of communion. These people didn't know who she was, but they weren't going to let her get pushed out, because if she's not welcome, they're not welcome. Fellowship is important. Harmony is important. We need that in a church to grow the church the way God wants to build it. I'm going to end with this. It is a story of always like, it's titled, Why They Fired the Preacher. Don't get any ideas. It starts off, it says, I don't know how long he had been at the church when the members noticed. I'm certain he must have been on his best behavior for at least a few months. Some of the members think that the first time they noticed was the night he failed to show up for a committee. The next day he explained to a member that he had met a friend who had invited him to a community activity. I knew you could carry on without me, he said with a disarming smile. Well, when he missed the first prayer meeting is a matter of dispute. Some say it was one day, some say it was another. But they all agreed he failed to show up a number of times. Not that he ever failed to provide for a speaker. It was just that, well, people kind of expect the preacher to be at the prayer meeting. A member recalls one explanation. A little job I had to get done at home, he said. It wasn't much, but it was bugging the wife. Then it was a Sunday evening he missed. The members do recall that date because just the week before, he had spoken on the brotherhood of believers and the necessity for Christian fellowship. So much more as you see the day approaching, he had quoted. The fact is, he explained to a member, I wasn't on the program, and since the whole family was at home for once, I decided to take time out to be with them. And I was really tired and probably wouldn't have gotten much out of the service anyway. Probably all this would have been forgiven if it hadn't been for the morning he arrived 10 minutes late for the church service. That morning he was to be the speaker. He didn't give any explanation. He just marched up from the front of the aisle to the front and went on as if nothing had happened. Before long, he was late more often than not. It got so you could almost count on his walking in with the other latecomers. When a deacon ventured to speak to him about it, he just said he had gotten into the habit of starting late and it was hard to kick the habit. The whole thing came to a head the morning he didn't show up for the service at all. On the spur of the moment, members learned later he had decided to go for a drive since the fall colors were so beautiful. Not many nice days left, he said, and I thought I'd not be missed since I met so many members on the way. Well, it was then that the church board met, talked over what it meant to be a minister in their church, and decided to get a dependable minister. He doesn't even know what membership in the church means, said one board member. He doesn't realize the importance of the church, said another. The secretary summed it all up in the minutes of the meeting after the vote to dismiss him had been passed. And this was her summary. It was clear that he cannot be the minister here if he insists on acting just like the rest of the members. Hey, the congregation expects a lot out of a minister. I get that. But here's the thing. God expects a lot more out of all of us. He doesn't expect us to be the lowest common denominator. He wants us to set ourselves apart and be different. And if we can be in harmony with each other, and if we can be in fellowship with each other, that alone tells the world that we are different. Because Jesus said, if you want people to know that you are my disciples, love one another. Love one another. That's what sets us apart from the rest of the world. It sets us apart as different. And people want to know why we are able to do that. When they ask you, hey, does everybody get along in your church? Well, we have our disputes, but yeah, pretty much we get along. We just try to be humble about it. We try to be flexible. We try to be humorous. But we all want to stand for the truth. We try to get into each other's lives and know what's going on so we can help take care of each other. That's what it's about. It's about being family. And that's what we need to do. God expects more out of us. But He expects more out of us because He expects us to give Him our lives. And we give Him our lives when we come to Him and we accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior. If you've never accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, maybe today's you come You be baptized with him so that you can begin to live a life that is different, a life that shows people and shows the world that God calls us to something big. If that's the decision you make, I encourage you to do it. Hey, maybe you're already a Christian, but you're looking for a family to become a part of. Maybe today's the day you come and become a part of this family. If that's what you need to do, come and join us here as we work to share the message of Jesus Christ in this community. Maybe you're already a Christian, you're already a member here. What has God put before you? What is he expecting? How can you build harmony? How can you build fellowship in this community so that we grow so strong together that there is nothing in the world that can stand against us because we have God on our side. And we are showing what it means to be a follower of him. What are you going to do? We're going to stand and sing our hymn of invitation. If you have a decision to make, I encourage you to do that today.